This video is brought to you by the Great Courses Plus. Thanks to this sponsorship, we're going to make a donation to the Henrietta Duterte Scholarship. This story has it all. Botched embalming? Yes. Missing corpse? Absolutely. Pagan rituals? You bet. It's the history of American cremation, and folks, it's wild. Sometimes I wonder, when a person clicks on one of my videos for the first time, are they thinking, is that just her voice? It's wild. Are we gonna get a full video of this person? No, I actually have a very deep voice. It's part of my thing. I'm like the Theranos lady. Today we have a story that's one of my absolute favorites. So good, I can't believe we've never covered it. Our star, our body, dare I say, our iconic corpse, is the man the New York Tribune described as principally famous as a corpse. I want that to be said about me so badly. He is the Baron Joseph Henry Louis Charles de Palme, or the Baron de Palme, America's first modern cremation. I say modern cremation because, of course, there were Native Americans that cremated on open-air pyres, but the Baron de Palme was the first to be cremated in a standalone brick building in an attempt at a reusable cremation machine, what we think about today when we picture a Western cremation. Before we make the full introduction to the Baron, we need to talk about early attitudes toward cremation in America. Your average American in the late 1800s was not keen on the idea of burning their dead. They associated cremation with hell and thought it was something those heathens in the East did with their dead. But there was a group that saw things very differently and saw cremation as our salvation, a way to purify America. Many members of this group were followers of a proto-New Age religion that combined East and West, religion and science, and some fire worship. We'll get back to that later. But the biggest influence on the rise of cremation was the mid-19th century Sanitarian movement. These are the folks who saw burial as dirty and gross, like bodies in the dirt and nasty fumes coming out of the graves, and everyone gets sick and like, ew. This was before the scientific breakthrough of germ theory. Spoiler, the correct theory was widely accepted and understood. Sanitarians believed disease and airborne illness was caused and spread by miasma, and that anything rotting, from dirty homes to trash piles to slaughterhouses to graveyards, was emitting these noxious miasma fumes and gas into the air and infecting people. To be fair, the Sanitarian movement brought us a lot of good things, like the Board of Health in major cities, and more effective means to control the spread of diseases like cholera. But there were also many things that early sanitarians got wrong, and a lot of those things had to do with corpses, and the poor, and immigrants. Cleanliness is next to godliness, is next to classism, is next to racism, is next to... In urban places like New York City, people just wouldn't stop dying, and cemeteries kept filling up with dead bodies. And according to the sanitarians, those buried, rotting corpses were releasing all the miasmas, and that's why people were getting sick. It's not why people were getting sick. They equated choosing burial with murder. There were various ideas on how to fix this. One was the rural cemetery movement. Put those diseasy corpses outside the city. Some preferred burial at sea. Others were all for airtight tombs or caskets. One proposition was turn the bodies to stone and then pulverize them into a powder. But soon, one idea rose above the rest: cremation. To a certain type of well-to-do, educated white American, cremation was the path to true sanitation. People like this man, the Reverend Octavius B. Frothingham. This guy was a prominent cremationist, but there's no real reason to bring him into this story, except for the fact that the man's name was the Reverend Octavius B. Frothingham. You've already met Baron Joseph Henry Louis Charles de Palme. These sound like very poorly made up characters. They are not, they are real. American cremation, baby. They were all psyched to save the disgusting world from its rotting corpses, but there was just one problem. No American had ever been cremated, at least no one like them. Enter the Baron de Palme. Now, the Baron is the one famous for actually getting cremated, but there was a whole cast of characters responsible for getting him to the flames. The main two you should know, that's four, the main two you should know were Dr. Francis Lemoine and Colonel Henry Alcott. Dr. Lemoine was a retired physician and an eccentric, outspoken abolitionist. He had been expelled from the Presbyterian Church for his radical ideas, and was described by an enemy as a filthy old man in bad clothes. To be fair, he probably was a little filthy because Dr. Lemoine believed God never intended for the human body to come in contact with water. Fire, though, is presumably going to be okay. It's a cremation story. Dr. Lemoine was all for cremation as a way to elevate the masses and reform society. Plus, he had the means with which to build the first crematory. Lemoine's eventual partner in this cremation was Colonel Henry Alcott, a progressive-minded lawyer and member of the New York Cremation Society. Alcott was troubled by a vampire problem. No more burial, no more vampires. Choose cremation for a vampire-free future. So we got one guy who doesn't believe in human contact with water, and another guy who's trying to prevent vampires. This is going well. More importantly, Alcott was the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, of which he eventually became the president. Described as a potent blend of Eastern and Western mysticism, Theosophy influenced countless New Age movements and Scientology's L. Ron Hubbard. Theosophists made for passionate pro-cremation advocates. It was a harder sell to the public, where both religious folks and atheists alike shared a distaste for the optics of cremation. Likened to a barbecue or a violent roasting, those who were anti-cremation pointed to submitting the remains of the dear departed relatives to the sizzling process. Where was the dignity in this? Where was the time-honored ritual? People weren't exactly breaking down Colonel Alcott's door to be cremated. All except Baron Joseph Henry Louis Charles de Palm. Baron de Palm was an Austrian immigrant who joined the Theosophical Society in 1875. De Palm was depicted as a man with land and castles and riches to his name, but he was actually quite destitute and alone. Nonetheless, he believed in the Theosophical Society and he believed in cremation, mainly because he was terrified of burial, as allegedly he had known someone who had been buried alive. De Palm made Alcott the executor of his will and instructed him, upon his death, to give him a big old Theosophist funeral and then cremate him. And when the Baron de Palm died on May 20th, 1876, Alcott got to work to do just that. The plan was to have a big debut for this new way of death, a Theosophical Society funeral, followed by a cremation handled by the New York Cremation Society. On May 28th, the Theosophical Society held de Palm's funeral, attended by over 2,000 people at the Masonic Temple in New York. Who ran the congregation at the Masonic Temple? The Reverend Octavius B. Frothingham. Octavius, we love him. Called a pagan funeral by the press, crowds curious about the society and de Palm's body pressed police to let them in to the already beyond capacity temple. Picture the scene. You have de Palm's coffin decorated with mystic symbols and encircled by 7 candles, symbolizing the 7 planets. The Theosophists waved palm leaves to keep evil spirits away. Colonel Alcott presided over the ceremony as high priest. Incense was burning as a symbol of the cremation to come. There was chanting, there were 7 men in hooded robes, there was a man screaming about the devil. This funeral has everything.
Ghosts, ghouls, goblins, my son.
And the Theosophists may have loved this funeral, but the press were like, no! Reviewers had this to say about the funeral. What's it like to have reviewers at a funeral? I don't usually go to funerals, but it was my girlfriend's birthday and we wanted something nice and heard good things about funerals. It was anything but nice. Boring corpse, ugly flowers, 2 stars. Reviewers called the funeral another exemplification of the wickedness of the metropolis. And the Theosophical Society was mocked as a circus of absurdity. Said the New York Tribune, it was A hodgepodge of notions, a mixture of guesswork and jugglery, of elixirs and pentagons, of charms and conjurations. That sounds fun to me, I don't know about you. Now, Colonel Alcott was like, all press is good press. My haters make me famous. But the New York Cremation Society got freaked out by the bad press and refused to cremate the body of Baron de Palm and slinked into the shadows until the 1880s. So Alcott was stuck with the corpse and no way to cremate it. Oh, hello there. Don't mind me. It's just that videos like this make me yearn for simpler times, when people slowed down, appreciated the home, and weren't so caught up in things like followers or life expectancy. I'm churning butter, by the way. That should be obvious. That's why I'm so happy that the Great Courses Plus sponsored this video. Why, with the Great Courses Plus, I was able to learn in my own home at my own pace and learn more about those pesky little organisms that made health in the 19th century so terrifying. In the course, Mysteries of the Microscopic World, Professor Bruce E. Fleury takes us on a scientific detective story through the wonderful world of microbes. This course gets you up close and personal with germs, vaccines, viruses, and all the human folly that helped us get from bloodletting to bacteria. Did you know that some species of medicinal leeches are still considered endangered today? With the Great Courses Plus, you can satisfy your curiosity about anything from leeches to lost worlds. Not only can you go at your own pace, but with a subscription you can get access to over 11,000 video lectures from top professors and educators from Ivy League universities, or places like the National Geographic or Smithsonian. The Great Courses Plus is offering our viewers a free trial. So please visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/askamortician to subscribe and start learning. You can also click on the link in the description below to start your free trial today. Stay tuned to the end of the video to learn about how the sponsorship from the Great Courses Plus allowed us to make a donation. I'll see y'all later. While the search for a crematory got underway, there was still the matter of what to do with Baron de Palm's corpse. August Buckhorst, an undertaker at New York's Roosevelt Hospital, as well as the undertaker for the Theosophical Society, took charge of de Palm's embalming needs. Initially, de Palm's body was injected with arsenic, common at the time, but it soon became apparent that while the crematory search slogged on, de Palm's body needed more heavy-duty fixins to preserve him for the long haul. Buckhorst, a big, burly, red-faced German, had a real joie de vivre for his calling as an undertaker and embalmer. Of course, this was the Wild West of embalming in New York City, so Buckhorst was still pretty much left to his own devices as to how de Palm's body would be preserved. First, Buckhorst took out de Palm's organs, and then he proceeded to pack the body cavities with a special concoction of potter's clay and crystallized carbolic acid, which he also rubbed all over de Palm's skin. The body was placed into a coffin and put into a receiving vault at a Lutheran cemetery in Williamsburg to await cremation. Yeah, de Palm waited at a receiving vault in a cemetery in Williamsburg before it was cool. While de Palm's corpse awaited its fate, Alcott was desperately trying to hold up his end of the bargain. Months went by and no options for cremation presented themselves. Until one day, reading the newspaper, Alcott came across a fellow by the name of Dr. Francis Lemoine, remember him, who was building a crematory in Washington, Pennsylvania. Lemoine had originally wanted to build the crematory at a local cemetery, but the people in the town refused to give permission, so instead he turned to the grassy knoll on his own property, known as Gallows Hill, because it had once been used for hangings. The old days. Lemoine had started construction in May of 1876 with the intention that this crematory would be for his future corpse. It was a small building that looked like a schoolhouse, and it had a reception room with some furniture, a place for the body, and a columbarium. The other room housed a coke-fired clay retort and furnace. Coke-fired, coke like the byproduct of coal that burns hotter, not cocaine. The cremation was wild, but not that wild. Windows on the outside of the building allowed people to peek in and see the cremation in process. Of course, the anti-cremation press was critical of the aesthetics of the crematory, calling it cheap and an architectural disaster.
Boo! Boo!
Colonel Alcott himself said it was very plain, repulsively so, as unaesthetic as a bake oven. I mean, it was America's very first DIY crematory. Cut the guy some slack. He doesn't believe in water. But despite it being this trash cremation shack, Colonel Alcott had, after months of searching, finally found a place to cremate De Palme, and by God, he was going to cremate De Palme. Using his background as a lawyer as well as his social connections, Alcott procured all the permits and the legal requirements for the crematory, and before long, Lemoine's crematory was ready for its first body. The cremation of Baron De Palme was set for the first week of December. Now to check on the body. In November, the embalmer Buckhorst opened De Palme's coffin to make sure he was still in a preserved state, while an accompanying reporter, because there's reporters at all of this, called De Palme a ghastly sight. The embalming job wasn't entirely unsuccessful. De Palme's skin was shrunken and discolored, but you could still tell it was him, and there was no bad smell. A win. On December 4th, De Palme, in his coffin, was loaded on the train to be taken to the crematory in Pennsylvania. A whole bunch of people from the Theosophical Society and a group of doctors, lawyers, journalists, and health officials traveled on the same train as De Palme's body. Alcott is there, he's networking, he's charming, he's entertaining, and he's converting all the people on the train to cremation. Two women were especially interested, and Alcott went on to say that he believed women would be the most zealous members of the cremation movement, due to the fact that cremation would preserve their beauty, while burial would set upon them the ugly ravages of decay. Easy, breezy, beautiful, cremated girl. All was going just dandy until the train arrived in Pittsburgh and De Palme's body was found to be missing. Whoopsie poopsie.
How can we have a cremation without a corpse?
That's Buckhorst stating the obvious as the train workers scoured the train for the missing body. The fear was that De Palme had been corpse-napped by pro-burial fanatics, but nothing so interesting. They had just lost the body in the baggage cart for a while, or something. You know, it's fine, they found it. Arriving in Washington, Pennsylvania on December 5th, the body was taken via a woefully shabby hearse to Lemoine's property. Upon arriving at the crematory reception room, it was surrounded by a mix of gawkers, officials, and journalists. Alcott opened De Palme's coffin that afternoon to check on the old man. Remember that in November, Buckhorst's embalming job wasn't entirely unsuccessful. It now appeared in December that it was in fact quite unsuccessful. A reporter from the New York World said that no spectacle more horrible was ever shown to mortal eyes. These reporters are a lot. They are ice cold. To be fair, De Palme's body had raisined down from 175 pounds to 92 pounds, and there was little more than a shriveled torso and a grinning skull. Alcott quickly closed the coffin and later had the body privately slathered in herbs and spices, shrouded in white linen, and placed into an iron cradle for the cremation. Buckhorst the embalmer probably got his hands in there too for some touch-ups, because the next day it was noted that De Palme had plumped up a little bit, didn't look quite as shriveled. At 2 a.m. on December 6th, the furnace was lit in order to get it to the prescribed 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1260 degrees Celsius. By around 8 a.m., witnesses, local thrill seekers, and all the folks from the train all tried to squeeze in to get a glimpse of De Palme going into the retort. Alcott again acted as high priest. At 8:30 a.m., Baron De Palme's body was placed into the retort head first. There was a sizzling sound before the door was cemented shut, and the gathering was at first, quote, repelled by the smell of burning flesh. However, the smell of the spices soon took over, and witnesses focused on other things, like when the corpse, supposedly due to involuntary muscle contractions, raised its hand and 3 fingers skyward. Hi. By 11:12 a.m., the Board of Health declared Baron De Palme's body fully incinerated, and with that, the first crematory in the Western Hemisphere cremated its first body. The total cost of DuPont's cremation came to $7.04. The cremated remains of DuPont were sprinkled with perfume by Alcott and gathered up in a Hindu-style urn, I'm not sure what that means, to be taken back to New York. Well, most of the cremated remains. Some of the witnesses took some ash for their fun time collections, and Dr. Lemoine took some bone fragments to keep in a bottle in his office. Once back in New York City, the majority of the remains were kept at the Theosophical Society headquarters until Alcott scattered them in New York Harbor before taking off to India, where he himself was eventually cremated. Good for him. There was an interview that Alcott gave with the New York World in 1877, where he produced a snuff box supposedly filled with a small portion of DuPont's ashes. When the reporter asked if other members of the Theosophical Society carried DuPont's ashes around in snuff boxes, he dismissed the idea, saying, "Some of them keep them in lockets that hang from their watch chains." Alcott also mentioned that he thought cremated remains would make an excellent tooth powder for cleaning teeth, but given his proclivity to troll the press, it's hard to say if he was serious. The Lemoine crematory went on to cremate 42 more bodies, including Lemoine himself in 1879. His ashes are buried at a grave just outside where the crematory building still stands. Oh, not such a shabby shack of a crematory, is it? Still standing almost 150 years later. And that, Deathlings, is the nothing has ever simple story of the cremation of the Baron Joseph Henry Louis Charles DuPont. And now over 50% of Americans are cremated. He's a pioneer. It's not a bad track record for someone principally famous as a corpse. Thank you to the Great Courses Plus for sponsoring this video. Here's where our donation is going this month. Back in June, I announced I would be funding a scholarship for Black female mortuary students. And I'm still doing that, but so many of you said that you also want to donate or help with this. So now there is a second scholarship to be funded by the Order of the Good Death and our supporters. The Order has partnered with the Community College of Baltimore County to create a scholarship in honor of Henrietta Duterte, the first female funeral home owner in the United States. There's a link below to donate, and the money goes directly to an endowment fund at the college. If we raise enough, the scholarship is forever, folks, every year going forward. The Order has also commissioned 4 pieces about race and the death industry that will be coming out over the next month on our website. Following our Twitter and Instagram is the best way to be aware of when those come out. This video was made with generous donations from death enthusiasts just like you. The Reverend Octavius B. Frothingham. Are those people gonna stay outside? I hope they're not here for Sunday Fun Day. It's not what I'm doing here. I'm working. The Reverend Octavius B. Frothingham. Ah? Theosophy. A whole bunch of theosophists. Theosophists. Sorry, I'm coming back. Kill it this time. And the theosophists made the Theosophical Society. Theosophists. And the theosophists love the funeral. Hold on. Unfortunately, the chicken cannot stay. I really can't stay. Maybe it's clock outside. Let's see if I can deliver it. Better, shall we? Let's not be terrible at our jobs. Whoopsie poopsie. Whoopsie poopsie. Whoopsie poopsie. So what you want? Don't you tell me to smile. You'll stick around and make it worth your while. Wow. As to how DuPont's body would the time of day when I just get so hot and the chicken just left and it's like, what is there to live for? Boo. Ah. Hey.